Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webcast. Next Steps in Talent Management, Part 2, Improve Employee Engagement by Rethinking Goal Setting and Performance Review Process, sponsored by Cultivate Consulting and presented by Rebecca Murray. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that this webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI credit and can also be used for SHRM credit. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credits. After the webcast, you will receive an email from HR.com within 1 to 2 business days. It will include the certification credit information. You can also log into HR.com and go to your View My Credits page, where you can see the credits you have received. If you have any questions today for our presenter or for HR.com, please type them into the Questions tab on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we will follow up with you. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to our presenter, Rebecca Murray.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I am very excited to present to you part 2 in the talent management webinar series. This particular topic we will focus on today is how to improve employee engagement by rethinking the goal setting and performance review process. This is actually an area I've been working on for probably about 11, 12 years, so I'm excited to share with you some of the changes that have been going on in this particular talent management process. So today we'll look at some of the traditional ways performance reviews and goal setting were conducted. Some of them may be familiar to you. And then we'll look at ways how we can improve upon that particular format, either make some complete revisions or just little modifications here or there to try to take your performance review process to the next level. To help us with that, we'll look at how to go about setting good, smart, relevant goals that are specific to employees. And we'll also talk about why it's important to be able to track and monitor the progress of this entire process. When we get close to the end, I will finish up with some best practice recommendations. Things that I've seen working really well recently that you can hopefully incorporate into your own performance review process. And then towards the end, we will finish up with questions and answers. Before we get going, just a little bit of background about myself. As Kathy mentioned, my name is Rebecca Murray, and I specialize in helping organizations transform their HR and talent management processes. I do that mainly through software, but of course over the past 12 years, I've certainly learned a lot on the business process side. So today we'll focus on the business process side of talent management, performance management, and goal setting. I look forward to walking you through the presentation. My organization, Cultivate Consulting, we are part of the Greater Illumity Group. We specialize in helping organizations manage their data, all sorts of data from human resource information to sales, management, plant maintenance, you name it, any type of strategic data that needs to be managed for your organization. We specialize in doing that. And of course, my group, Cultivate, focuses just on the HR piece. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. And let's talk about some of the ways we have seen performance reviews in the past, and you may be doing some of these today. They may have some familiarity to you. This is actually a process that my old company, a few companies back, used to use. And that is, as an employee, we would all get together with a manager, maybe, in January for about 2 to 3 weeks and set our annual goals. And then we would come back at the end of the year and evaluate those goals in a formal performance review process. And some of my customers optionally throw in a mid-year check-in right there in the middle, and then some don't. But if you look at this, and I drew this myself, so it's not to scale, but if you look at kind of this timeline, if you will, over the course of a whole year, you can see there's a whole lot of blue space where nothing's happening related to these goals that we set in January. People are working away, they're going about their day-to-day tasks, they're working on projects, or they're producing products, whatever their business may be. but really no tie back to those goals that we set at the beginning of the year, and really no further mention of them or connection to them till we get to the end of the year, where we go and review and evaluate them. So this is what it's like from the employee point of view. And this was my own personal experience that I documented for you. In January, I would try to sit there and think of goals that, sounded good on paper, but wouldn't actually take a lot of my time or effort, because of course I had all my regular day-to-day tasks to do. So I didn't really have time to focus on anything special. And I never received any sort of guidance as to what my goals should relate to. And we actually recorded them in this very elaborate Excel spreadsheet, which someone took a lot of time to put together. I would put my goals in there and I'd email them off to my manager. And I never got feedback on them, so I assumed that they were received. But I just saved a copy in my, on my laptop in a folder, and I would come back and review them at the end of the year. So from February to November, there was no, reference to the goals, no reminders, no updates, no tracking, no progress. It was really that set them and forget them mentality. And then December would come around and I would open up my goal plan, what can I do between now and a week to cross off some of these goals, or what can I take out of what I've done over the past, 10, 11 months and try to rework them to be in a time. I would end up rewriting my goals so that they would match up with the things that I had actually done. And I'm sure a lot of you happened, because there was really no accountability. No one checked to make sure I set my goals at the beginning of the year, and repercussion or no follow-up. So if we were in a classroom, I'd say show of hands, but since we're on the webinar, I think we've got our first poll question. Kathy? So the first poll question is, who currently has a performance management process that resembles this one? And there's no judgment, so just go ahead and put in your response if your process looks like the one that we just reviewed. Okay, great.
Okay.
Getting a lot of feedback. How's it looking, Kathy?
Okay, so we have about 65% of the audience has voted, so everyone will just leave it open a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close that poll, and here are our results. So 61% yes, 39% no.
Okay, so more than half, right? 60+% are saying that that's what their current process looks like. And if we go back just one or two slides, you can see that that's a lot of downtime with no throwback to those goals. So then what is it that employees are actually working on, and how do we know? Here's the problem with that current, because the way that we do our work today is different than how we used to do it. So that this doesn't really meet the needs of the current workforce. And from an employee point of view, mine particularly, I always saw that as busy work. It was something that I did at the beginning and end of the year just because I had to do it. I didn't get anything out of it. It didn't motivate me to achieve those goals. There was no coaching, or you may have more than one manager. So then who goes about and does that year-end review? Or who do you set your goals with if you report to 2 or even 3 different people? We're also in need today more than ever, as the workspace is changing and the way we do business is honestly changing very rapidly. We need a process that's going to be able to be flexible and to be updated as our business, a flexible and easy to use process, something that's very agile. And then of course, all of that blue time in that wonderful calendar that I drew for you, that's wasted time for engagement with employees. Trying to keep top talent, and to be quite honest, even just good or decent talent nowadays is a struggle. There are, shortages among our industries of top and well-trained talent. So having opportunities to engage them and keep them connected to our organization is essential. and we've just given them, a couple weeks worth of busy work and said, set it and forget it. And we didn't take the opportunity to make this an engagement tool, which would be beneficial not only to us in terms of productivity, but beneficial because now we have a point of engagement that we can use to try to retain our employees. It's also missing this concept of alignment. If you'll recall, I said I just kind of came up with my goals myself. Some of you may be using some strategic initiatives or corporate categories that you try to get people to align their goals to. But if you're not doing some sort of formal alignment or initiative process, then people are just picking their goals from wherever. And so then at the end of the year, there really probably isn't 1, 2, or 4 key areas where progress was made because things are just spread out all over the place. All right, so then now we've identified the problem, let's talk about how we can go about fixing this. And that really involves taking your performance management process to that next level. Just a quick snapshot as we get there. And this kind of reflects a little bit what we saw with that first poll. But here's what some of your peers are doing, what they're planning. And this survey was actually done across 77 different organizations in 21 different industries. And this was actually done 2 years ago. So when you see that 55% of organizations are thinking that cascading goals to build alignment is something that they want to do, think that that number is 2 years old. So it's only increased since that point in time. And then about half, as of 2 years ago, started thinking that coaching conversations on a regular basis would help improve the performance management process. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Ways that we can improve the current process, either by slightly modifying it or reworking it altogether, depending on where you're starting. So these are the 4 key steps we're going to discuss today. And if you want to take a screenshot, of one slide, this would be the slide to take the screenshot of. Although, of course, you can always download the slides from hr.com. The 4 things that you can do to revamp your performance process are to align your goals across your organization so that your employees are working on specific initiatives. Now, those goals can't be general or generic. They must be specific to the employee. We're going to talk about this in depth in the next section. Instead of setting those goals at the beginning of the year and then ignoring them and coming back, we're going to focus on short-term goals that are aligned to those long-term initiatives. So it's okay to say that you want, your organization to focus on something for this year. But the way we go about achieving that should be chopped up into smaller, more achievable goals. And we'll look at why that's beneficial. We should take the opportunity to enhance the process by adding in frequent coaching and feedback, because that lets employees know that they're on the right track. It gives them the opportunity to be praised and appreciated. But then it's also that touch point, that built-in engagement, where an employee can come in and say, I'm in touch with my organization and my organization is in touch with me, and to help build, establish, and maintain relationships between employees and organizations. And then finally, the 4th piece that we can do is to track progress and monitor completion. And we'll talk about that in a separate section. But one of the reasons we do that is because we need to know how people are doing. What's the point of doing all this if we're not getting some sort of measurement or metrics at the end to say, yes, we as an organization were successful, or we were not successful, or we made it this far, and here's why. So being able to track progress and monitor completion gives you that opportunity to reach success. And it also helps with that frequent coaching and feedback that we're asking people to provide along the way. So of course I drew you another calendar or timeline. And so we've got our year laid out. But now instead of just those 2 big blocks at the end, I've just drawn in some random orange lines so that you can see we're going to take the opportunity to enhance our traditional process by adding in those continuous coaching sessions and feedback opportunities. And so now this is really a whole new model. And you may think to yourself, well, okay, that's, easier said than done, or that's, a silly piece of feedback to give. But I know from my personal experience at my last organization, the other bar is what we had. And having a bar that looks like this, even with just periodic touch points, would remind me that I'm supposed to be working on my goals. And of course, if I took the time to align those goals, then we know that everyone in our team or division or department is working towards a similar goal. Okay, so poll number 2. Who currently has a performance management process that resembles this one, with periodic, well, actually, I guess frequent coaching and feedback throughout the course of the year?
The poll has been launched. We'll leave it open about 10-15 seconds.
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay, it looks like the voting has stopped, so I'm going to close the poll, and I'll share the results with everyone. We have 40% yes and 60% no.
Okay, that's actually more than I thought it would be. Still slightly below that half, but a good number for us to get started with. That's excellent. And for those of you who are in the 60% that aren't doing something like that, you can see that it's not necessarily a small number of people who are incorporating in those frequent touch points, that it is a large group and hopefully a growing number. All right, let's look at some ways where we can help make this happen. I said there were 4 things that we were going to do. We're going to talk about the second one first, and that's this concept of shorter goals. Setting small, short-term goals that are easier for employees to focus on. And I know me personally, I'd like to come up with my little to-do list for the day, and as I do something, I cross it off, and I feel really excited that I've accomplished something. And this is almost that same similar concept, not necessarily on the day-to-day level, but short-term enough where it stays in an employee's focus, that they know about the start and end date when they're supposed to achieve this small goal. And it gives employees the opportunity to have wins throughout the course of the year and to receive feedback and praise for those wins during the year. It also gives us the opportunity to make adjustments if needed. So if an employee's role in the organization adjusts, or if the focus of an organization, their business plan for the year, happens to do some sort of adjustment, then we can make adjustments with our goals. They're not all out the window. If we were focusing on launching product A, and all of a sudden we've pushed that back for 9 months, and now we're, all lost without a goal to focus on. The key thing to remember about setting shorter goals is that they can still be used to help satisfy the requirements of a long-term initiative. So if you have annual initiatives, it doesn't mean that you're throwing those by the wayside. It just means that you're working towards them in small, little workable segments. And I've put together kind of an example demonstrating the two. And I did it with a sales example because I think sometimes selling things with numbers where you can actually quantify something is a little bit easier for people to visualize. But take this same example and, translate it into a non-numerical related piece. So the old way, at the beginning of the year, you would say, I want to sell 24 widgets this year. And that aligns with the overall company, department initiative for all the salespeople to sell 1,000 widgets total. And if you're not really focused on that particular goal regularly and frequently, then sometimes we'll go periods of time without thinking about that goal. And so it may be October, November, December where we start thinking, gosh, I should really start selling those particular widgets and hope that I get to my 24 by the end. It's the same reason why we see police officers giving more tickets at the end of a month or the end of a quarter to make their quota. If we had done a little bit each day, we wouldn't have to be stacking things towards the end. So here's how that translates to in kind of this revised process. In January through December, I will sell 2 widgets each month. And that still gets me my 24, which is in theory still the same goal that I had in the old way. But now I'm thinking of that in smaller chunks. It's still aligned to my overall department initiative to sell 1,000 amongst the entire department. But now I have something to strive towards and monitor and track towards each particular month. Each particular month, I can go back and see how many I sold so that I know whether I'm on track or behind track. I'm constantly, aware of my initiatives because I have this short-term goal that I need to reach. And I have a set time period, 1 month, and a set quantity, 2 widgets, that I need to be able to achieve. What I'm pulling up for you now is a screenshot of a technology solution that kind of revises that old Excel spreadsheet that we used to see. And so instead of setting those goals, those big goals at the beginning of the year, this is just an informal tool that helps me record my short-term goals and activities and be able to monitor and provide updates and achievements on them in just a very casual, informal process. The thought here being that if we can make it easy to use and casual, people will actually take the opportunity to go in and use them. And if we make these goals short-term, then people have the opportunity to accomplish something multiple times throughout the course of the year and to be praised and appreciated for that multiple times during the course of the year. So you can see on this screenshot, I've put in 2 small short-term goals. One is to produce a new marketing campaign for the Excel props line, and the other is to finalize registration for the industry sales conference. So that is what this employee, Marcus, is working on currently. Those are his 2 short-term goals. And if you can see on the left-hand side, the manager responsible for Marcus, her name is Carla. All of her team members are listed there, and she can just move from employee to employee and see their short-term goals. And if I open up one of those short-term goals, I can actually see that they're tied back to those longer initiatives. So there was a long-term initiative to work on aligning marketing and distribution towards new products. And Marcus had a personal development goal to get more engaged with the sales team in the field. And so he and Carla came up with this short-term goal that's helping him work to those 2 long-term initiatives. And so at the end of the year, let's say Marcus had, a dozen or 15 shorter goals and 3 or 4 long-term initiatives, it's more than likely that he's got these small goals aligned to those long-term initiatives, and these are his achievements and accomplishments that he's been working on through the course of the year. It's pretty neat when you think about it. Okay, one of the other things that we can do to revamp or improve the current performance process is this concept of frequent coaching and feedback. And I know that this is possibly an adjustment for some organizations because you may be thinking that your employees and managers really have so much on their plates already. But in reality, or in theory, I guess, providing coaching and feedback is part of the responsibility of being a manager. So this is one of the tasks that a manager should be doing. And if an employee's goals are short-term, then it should be at the forefront of everyone's mind. And if those goals are aligned to some sort of strategic initiative, yet still specific enough to the employee, then this is the stuff that employees and managers should be discussing on a regular basis anyway. But now we have the opportunity for the manager to provide feedback, to know where assistance may be needed, or to maybe course correct if we're not headed down the right path for a particular goal, either because the day-to-day tasks of the employee are getting in the way, or there's been a reshift or a refocus in what they're working on. But this is an excellent way to foster engagement with that employee, to have a touch point to let an employee know that they are, a contributing member of the team and the overall organization. And it lets the manager know what their team is up to and how well they're doing in terms of accomplishing their set goals. Every once in a while we meet with managers out in the field or in an office building to try to figure out how it is they're doing their day-to-day jobs. And one of the things they frequently ask for is, I wish I had a structured way to provide, input or feedback to my employees. And they also say, I wish I had a better handle on what it is my team members were working on, so that when I get asked about, the status of my team and the progress of our work, I have some specific things that I can throw out there. And incorporating these little feedback and coaching sessions throughout the year, either biweekly or monthly, whatever frequency you determine is appropriate, means that it's satisfying those needs of the manager. On the employee side, when we go out and speak to employees, we hear very regularly that they would like to have feedback on the work that they're doing and be praised for the good things that they've done, especially in incorporating younger employees into the workforce. They're used to receiving feedback and they're used to receiving praise for the work that's been done. And in fact, oftentimes with younger employees, a lack of praise is interpreted as a sign that they're doing something wrong, when in reality, they may be doing just fine. There's just not that outward extension of feedback or praise. So incorporating that in gives different employee populations and manager populations the opportunity to engage with each other. The other thing that's nice, and I'm assuming most of you on the line are on the HR side, but the thing that's nice about that from the HR side is that you can benefit from this feedback and coaching sessions as well, because there's the opportunity to track that these are taking place, to track what's being done, and also to give managers opportunities for leadership and communication development. So in essence, you're helping to groom your managers to become better leaders by having them engage in these mini feedback and coaching sessions. And so what does that look like in terms of a tool to help us assist with this process? I've pulled up a screenshot right here. You can see we're back to Marcus's goal of producing that new marketing campaign. And Carla's gone in and she's just provided a quick 1 or 2 lines. I saw the proofs, they look great, keep me posted. Marcus can go back in there and reply again, and there can almost be a little dialogue or exchange. And all of this is done, just right here within this application or mobile device. And it's all very casual and very informal. So there's no pressure in terms of coming up with elaborate content. It's just all very informal, if you will. And then these are things that can be discussed during those coaching and feedback sessions. Let's talk about these 3 goals that you're working on. We saw the proofs. What are you working on now? What's the next step? So these basically form the structure for your conversation. And you should talk about things other than just the goals while you're taking the opportunity to meet with someone. Find out what other things they'd like to develop or what other areas you can provide feedback and coaching in. And so this particular solution gives you the opportunity to fill in those additional pieces as well. Okay, that brings us to our third and last poll. Who currently uses a software solution to help them manage their performance reviews? And I'm thinking something outside of Excel or Microsoft Word.
Okay, the third poll has been launched. We'll leave it open about 15 more seconds. Okay, everyone, I'm going to close the poll and share the results with you. So we have 54% yes and 46% no.
Okay, perfect. about half and half. And I think even for those of you who don't have a software solution to help you, just having something, even if it is a spreadsheet or an Excel sheet, something where you can start putting things down on, electronic paper, if you will, and documenting them is a great step towards having a formalized performance review process. So it sounds like we're all well on our way. Goals with a purpose. So we talked about 4 things that we can do to kind of revamp our process. I broke this one out separately, goals with a purpose, because this is something that you can do as a small step. Even if you don't have the opportunity to put in that feedback and coaching regularly throughout the year, maybe that's something you want to build towards. Setting goals with a purpose can be done with your existing process right now. And so the thing that you want to ask yourself when you go through the performance review process, the whole thing, setting the goals all the way to the year-end evaluation, is what is it you hope to achieve at the end of this year-long process? And I put 3 things down. I've highlighted 2 just because the third is, while important for business processes, kind of a byproduct, if you will. But really what you should be hoping to get out of your process is productivity, is work, is progress in some particular areas, strategic areas. And whether you as the HR group determined what those areas would be, or if a leadership committee or an executive team determined what those areas should be, there's a need to make progress in certain areas. The areas were identified, and people should work to make progress in those identified areas. The other thing, and oftentimes this is overlooked in terms of either item 1 or item 3 in this bullet list, but is the opportunity for employee growth and development. Because we want to make sure that our employees are doing their jobs well and also improving. Even if they do them a really great job right now, we still want to make sure that we're adding to their overall growth and development. So that should be the second thing that you hope to get out of this process. The third, the unhighlighted piece, is some sort of final score or baseline number to help you with your compensation process, merit increases, bonuses, awards, and that type of thing. So in order to meet these initiatives, particularly those first 2, there are 3 things that we really need to do. The first is that goals need to be aligned to a strategic initiative. So instead of just giving a blank sheet to an employee and tell them, hey, come up with 4 goals to work on this year, give them either categories or specific initiatives that they should align their particular goal to. And this sometimes is the problem with rolling out a company-wide goal, unless it's something particular like, increase recycling and reduce paper waste that can apply to everyone. You really need to take that strategic initiative and make it specific to the employee. That's item number 2. So if the strategic goal is to focus on, improving customer service throughout an organization, that shouldn't be your employee's goal. That's not something that's measurable or specific to the employee. Instead, take that particular initiative and tailor it so that whatever that goal is relevant to their individual function within the organization. And then finally, you need to have a way to monitor and track progress. When an employee makes an update or an achievement has been made, and you need to be able to report on these. Because how do you know that things are happening if you can't see them? And how do you know whether a change needs to be made or a value needs to be, increased or decreased if you aren't sure where people are? And people kind of sometimes ask, what is the best way to go about making sure we have purposeful goals? How many goals should someone have? If you're thinking of the old long-term process where you set the goals in the beginning of the year and evaluate them at the end, then somewhere around 6 goals is a good number to work on through the year because they're year-long initiatives. And typically what I see is that they will be aligned from the top down. So an organization will set some strategic initiatives, and then maybe a department or team will set their own initiatives, and an employee's 6 goals will be a combination of those particular initiatives. Some of my customers allow for 1 or 2 personal development goals, things that the employee wants to work on individually that may or may not be one of the strategic focuses. And that really just depends on how much opportunity you want to have for growth and development in this process, and whether or not you have a separate process for employee development and growth. If you're doing those short-term goals that we talked about in the previous section, then really it just depends on how short they are and how long it takes for them to be accomplished. And that's really the nice thing about setting short-term goals and needing to review them regularly, is that you can always make adjustments. And as one goal gets accomplished, you can set the next goal right then and there. So there's really not a right or a wrong number for that particular process. You know, you want to give someone about 2 different things to be working on at a time. But then once they complete, go ahead and set a new short-term goal. So here are the rules for setting goals. And I'm sure everyone is familiar with kind of the first bullet point there, the concept of SMART goals. We want them to be specific and measurable and achievable and all that good stuff. That has been our go-forward strategy with goal setting for a little while now. Let's build on that. Not only do we want them to be specific, measurable, and achievable, we need them to be clearly stated, so that an employee knows without confusion what it is they are working towards. They should be contributing to the company's overall strategy. That's that concept of alignment. So making sure that we're working for the greater good of the organization. They should be tied back to the employee's particular job function, so what it is that they're doing. If you just put in kind of a generic goal in there, then it becomes busy work. It's something that I have to do outside of my normal day-to-day work. It's not something that I'm trying to improve during my day-to-day work. So make sure that it's particularly relevant and specific to the employee. And then take the opportunity to avoid overlap and minimize competing initiatives by making sure that all the different department goals are visible to all managers. So this is specifically important when employees are reporting to more than one manager. Make sure all the managers are aware of the initiatives within that same department. Because if I report to 2 different people and I've got one initiative coming from one manager and a competing or derivative goal coming from another manager, then I'm a little bit at a crossroads as to where I should spend my time or put my attention. So make sure there is that visibility across the different departmental units. When it comes to an alignment, just a little note here, because people always ask, well, our executive wants us to focus on this, but then our head of sales wants us to focus on this, and this particular group really does their own thing when it comes to setting goals and initiatives, and so-and-so works off of numbers, and other people, work towards other different types of things. The reality is that you're going to need to find the proper mix for your particular organization. Some things work well with certain types of businesses or certain corporate cultures that are in existence. But really, you should be aligning goals at the employee level somewhere. They should be tied somewhere so that there's a set focus. And that can either be at the corporate level, at the department level, or even down at the individual team level. And what I usually recommend to my customers and what I've seen working in actual reality is really a combination of all of those different things. It could be that some strategic corporate initiatives are set and then passed down to the department, and each department kind of tweaks them a little bit to make them relevant to that department, and then passes them down to the team where they're tweaked just a little bit more before they're given to the individual. Or there could be corporate initiatives that are set that are well-defined and particular already, and they can be made specific to the individual employee. And then there may be additional department or team initiatives that are directly tied to the employee as well. So you can kind of take one and cascade it down, or you can have a combination of these two or three and align them specifically to the employee. There's not a right or a wrong way to do it. You'll come up with your own unique mix of how to do things. But if you're using that old traditional, set the goals at the beginning and you're focused on, 4 to 6 goals, then about 2 to 3 would be at the corporate level and the rest would be at the smaller level. Again, specific to the employee and the role and function that they serve within the organization. And so here's an example of what that looks like in a system. You can see in the top left-hand corner, I've got 2 sections, one called business process and the other called innovation and learning. Those are the strategic initiatives that were set for this particular organization. They had a handful. This is a snapshot of 2 of them. And you can see that there are 2 goals set for this particular employee: increase revenue and profitability with new process and pricing, and then attend key industry and technical conferences to dialogue with prospects. And if I look above that, I can see that those goals were directly aligned with this employee's manager so that they tie up to the team goals of this particular team. And I can see what the manager is working with in terms of, actual measurements. And I can see what the employee has put in terms of actual measurements. So I'm able to view this at the employee level, but as it relates to my team as a whole. And then, of course, as a manager, I have a view down where I can see my entire organization working towards this one particular piece. And as I go up and up through my organizational structure, I have a broader view down, seeing all the different employees who are working on an initiative aligned to mine, and the particular corporate or strategic objective that falls into. Okay, the fourth thing that we want to do when revamping the performance and goal setting process is to track and monitor progress. And this has been an area that I've been focusing on for a while now, because technology is changing how human resources works, how it functions, and how it's viewed in the workplace. And so it used to be that human resources was seen as a transactional unit within the business, that we did the hiring and the firing and we put through all the paperwork. But with the advent of technology and tools to help make those basic processes easier, we're finding that we have time to be strategic across our organization. And not only that, but the technology is giving us some numbers that help us towards our initiative of being strategic. So now we can have data to help back up the different processes we're putting in place. But we also have data to give to other units within the business to help them make their business decisions. And so you'll probably have noticed at a lot of organizations across the board that HR used to be, headed up by a manager. And then we incorporated in HR directors. And now we're starting to see HR being at the VP level and the CHRO level, because people are beginning to realize that HR is a major component of the overall corporate structure, that there is value in HR beyond just being transactional, that we're able to help with things like workforce planning and rolling out initiatives and business processes across the board. In order to continue our pattern of being strategic, we need data in order to do that. And so when it comes to the performance management process, we need data to help us be strategic in this effort. So here's why we track and monitor, or why we should. And this is awfully hard to do if you're still using spreadsheets or Word documents. You'll have to come up with some way to kind of tabulate results and processes as you go along. And then, of course, at the end of the process. But, at the surface, we want to know how things are going. We want to know what people are working on, how well they're achieving what it is they're working on, if we need to make any adjustments in the process or provide any additional support. You'll probably also start to be asked by your leadership, department heads, executives, leadership committees, how their strategic initiatives are going. If they took the time to set them at the beginning of the year, it's reasonable to expect that not only would they want some sort of measurement or result at the end of the year, but they may also want some progress or status updates throughout the course of the year. And if you're not somehow either compiling that data out of the spreadsheets or the Word docs, or getting good reports and updates out of your system, then you're not going to be able to turn that information around. And of course, you need to be able to make adjustments as we're going. So as we're monitoring the progress of these different initiatives, if we need to make course corrections or adjustments, we have the ability to do so. Otherwise, we get to the end of the year and find out we didn't sell those 1,000 widgets like we thought we would. We missed it. Here's where we really fell off or fell short. If we know ahead of time, we can either redirect our efforts or redouble our efforts or provide support where it's needed. And then, of course, on the employee growth and development side, employees want to know, when they've completed an initiative, and whether or not it was successful. And that's at the employee level, the team level, the department level, and the overall organization level. So good technology makes this possible for us. Good technology allows us to put this information out, not just to HR team members and to leadership members, but to managers and possibly to individual employees should they have a need for it, so that all participants in this process are informed and aware of how it's going. For me, because I'm a visual person, the easiest way to do that is through visualizations like these dashboards and charts you see here. But being able to provide regular status updates or real-time information about some of these initiatives, especially if we're taking the time to align our goals and objectives, really lets people know where we are, what the current status is, and what the progress is. And here's just another example of what some of these progress reports and tracking can give us. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap up. We'll recap some of the recommendations that were scattered throughout the presentation. The first thing we want to keep in mind is that some of our performance processes may very well be outdated. They may not be keeping up with the agile nature of business as we see it today, and not flexible enough to provide long-term value, either to our employees for growth and development, or to our organization in terms of productivity. The other thing that I sometimes find, and I'm not sure if I mentioned this or not, but a lot of times performance processes can be very, very complex. I'll have organizations kind of send me samples of their performance forms so that I can kind of take a look at them and see where we can make improvements. And a lot of times they come with their own little separate instruction sheet and all of these different tabs or worksheets, and they've got comment boxes off to the side, and there are these very elaborate formulas to calculate a total score built into the back end. And if you don't happen to have the right number of goals or they're not weighted appropriately, it's not going to calculate correctly. And that can be, intimidating to an employee and to a manager, and, can just be a complex process to engage in. So when we're looking for processes that are not complex, and that are agile enough and flexible enough to keep up with our organization. You should always try to focus on alignment and engagement when you're setting up your process, whether you're going for those short-term goals or you're going to stick with your long-term annual goals. Either way, having those goals aligned to strategic initiatives or department goals or team goals means that your individual employees are working on something that's going to help with the overall greater good of the organization, and they're not just out in the left field doing their own thing. And then the opportunity for engagement. To set these goals and align them and communicate them to the employee is the opportunity for discussion. And that constant coaching and feedback means continuous engagement, keeping that relationship established and building on it throughout the course of the year. It is my recommendation that you look at moving away from those long-term goals to the short-term goals. Give people the opportunity to focus on a long-term initiative in small, manageable chunks. To say, okay, for this month, I'll be working on this particular piece. Yes, it aligns to some long-term broad initiative, but right now I'm just focusing on this small piece of it. And I know that if I focus on a small piece every month, by the end of the year, I've done 12 small pieces, and that gets me to my long-term, larger initiative. With that particular philosophy, annual reviews do not need to fall by the wayside. In fact, we're just kind of augmenting how they go about. Because instead of, at the end of the year, trying to come up with a list of all the great things that I've done, now I'm taking that opportunity each month to document all the great things that I've done. And I'm not doing them after the fact. I'm setting them as goals, and I'm achieving them over the course of that month. By the time I get to the end of the year, when I go through that formal review process, I have all my achievements already documented. So we're taking the opportunity to enhance with smaller pieces and taking the opportunity to provide regular coaching and feedback about those smaller pieces. So that as an employee, I know I'm on the right track every step of the way. I'm getting appreciation and praise for what I'm doing well. I'm getting some constructive criticism for areas where I may need an improvement. And I know that I'm progressing as I should be. And as a manager, I know exactly what my team's up to. I know what they're working on, and I know that we're making progress to our team goals and our department goals. Goals should be clearly stated and specific to the employee. If they are not clear or they are not specific, they just won't get done. Or they'll be open to interpretation, and then you may not be getting the end result that you're looking for. Track and monitor the progress of these initiatives. You don't know if people are going to be successful or if you're on track unless you're keeping track of how people are doing. The easiest way to do that is by using some sort of technology solution, because everything's in there and compiled for you, and you can get those visual results out. If you don't have access to a technology solution at this time, at least build in opportunities throughout the course of the year to compile initial feedback as to what's going on. And then, of course, my parting advice to you is to focus less on that end number, that final score, and work more on growing the employee. Because as our employees grow and develop and improve in the work that they're doing, they're going to end up with those higher scores. They're going to be doing better anyway. And that, my friends, leads us to our last bullet point in this session, which is the question and answer portion. So Kathy, I will give it back to you for some questions. I can see that some have been coming in, and I'd be happy to answer them.
Sure, Rebecca. We do have quite a few questions in. Now, to the audience, if we don't get time to get to your question, Rebecca will follow up with you via email. Okay, first here, what is the downside of not aligning goals?
Well, that's a good question, because it does take a little bit of planning initially to align goals, coming up with, your initiatives that you want people to align their goals to. But The downside is that people will just be working on their own thing, that they'll come up with their own goals that may or not be, heading towards the vision or the direction that your organization is heading towards. So that's the risk, that they're just, unfocused, working out on whatever it is they may want to on their own.
Thank you. What is the difference between cascading goals and aligning goals?
Good question. Good question. You'll hear both terms used sometimes interchangeably. Technically, there's a difference. It's very minor. Cascading goals means that you take a goal, you start it at the top of the organization, and push it down to everyone within that area of command, modifying and tweaking it a little bit as you go, so that everyone in a particular area of responsibility or chain of command is working on that one cascaded goal. And it's a goal. It's not an initiative or a focus area. Alignment is where we take a goal that we're giving to an employee or that they've come up on their own, and they tie it back to a particular initiative, something at that top level or at the department level. Their manager doesn't necessarily need to be working on it. Other people in the department don't necessarily need to be working on it, but they have tied their particular goal back to one particular area. So cascading, everybody gets it within a chain of command, and it pushes all the way down to a certain level. Alignment, everyone doesn't need to have this particular one, but an employee can kind of come up with their own goal and tie it back to that functional area.
Perfect, thank you. We have time for a few more questions. Our employees and managers don't have time to regularly set and review short-term goals. How can we make this happen?
I think it's just one of those things that you would ask or encourage them to start making part of their, periodic work progress. I always found for me as an employee that it was really stressful come December trying to go back and really backfill what it is I had done to meet those goals. And I always said to myself, I wish I would keep up with it during the course of the year. And having these frequent discussions is basically providing structure to that wish, that we keep up with it during the course of the year. And really, if the goals are short-term and specific to the employee, then they're really things that they should be working on anyway. And meeting with a manager and discussing, feedback and getting commentary is really just part of the nature or role of being a manager, providing that particular type of feedback. So if they're aligned and if they're specific to the employee, that work should be happening anyways. And now you're just building in touch points to provide progress and feedback.
Okay, we have time for one last question. Our performance review final score feeds into merit increases and bonuses. Can we still do that with this new process?
Yes. You don't have to get rid of it. You're not going to score each of the short-term goals throughout the year. You would still just score at the end. It could be that you set year-long goals at the beginning or year-long initiatives that you'll be striving towards. And each of the short-term goals could point back to one of those long-term initiatives. And so when you get to the end, you kind of have all your achievements already lined up. And then you can evaluate based on that particular, year-end summary, if you will. So you'll come up with your final score, your commentary, your feedback and review for the year as a whole, and come up with a single score.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. Unfortunately, we're out of time for the other questions.
Sure.
But do you have any final last closing remarks for our audience?
I guess for me, because I'm a people person, my thought is always to focus on the employee and their growth and development. And if you kind of keep that in mind, it's always been my experience that the rest just falls into place. And know that the kind of the steps we went over today, you don't have to put them in place all at once. You can kind of take small pieces of each one and just work on revamping as you go, because even just small improvements make a big difference.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much to Rebecca Murray of Cultivate Consulting for presenting this very informative webcast today. Just a few reminders for the attendees. If you would like to view this webcast again, the archive recording will be available on site for up to 7 days. Slides are also available to download. Your webcast credits are stored in your HR.com account. Watch for your email to arrive within 1 to 2 business days. It will contain the certification credit information. Your feedback is important to us. Please take a moment and fill out the exit survey that will appear on your screen. And again, if your question was not answered live, we will be sending those over to Rebecca to follow up with you. This concludes today's webcast. Enjoy the rest of your day.